There is a scene in the Gospel of St. Luke in chapter 11 where the Gospel writer tells us that one day Jesus was praying in a certain place. And after he had finished praying, one of his disciples approached him with a request. He said, "Lord, can you please teach us how to pray the way John the Baptist taught his disciples to pray?" You know, I have a feeling that today's gospel scene was Jesus' response or answer to that request. And that the request probably came from one of the three apostles who were present at his transfiguration, Peter, James, and John. The core group within the core group of Jesus. In St. Luke's version of this transfiguration story, we are told categorically that Jesus was himself praying when he was transfigured. This is one of the few scenes where we are told Jesus prayed not alone, but in the company of the three disciples who were the closest to him. And so I look at this feast day, which we are celebrating today, as Jesus' way of mentoring his disciples on prayer. First, Matthew tells us Jesus led them up to a high mountain by themselves. I take this to mean that Jesus asked the three of them to each find a quiet corner on that mountaintop where they could find some solitude, a very important component of prayer, solitude. The Gospels tell us Jesus himself went into solitude every now and then by climbing a mountain or going to the desert or being alone in a boat by himself or walking by the lake shore. And usually he did this very early in the morning before daybreak. Secondly, perhaps because they were not that used yet to solitude, the disciples ended up watching Jesus from a distance instead and witnessing something wonderful, a change of appearance taking place while he was deeply absorbed in prayer. We call it transfiguration. We have similar descriptions of what happened to Moses whenever Moses went up to Mount Sinai to pray. That his face became bright, that there seemed to be a glow emanating from his whole being. And that is not surprising. Through prayer, a lot of people are able to achieve an inner sense of peace and serenity that can indeed effect a change on our own appearance, demeanor, and behavior. Thirdly, Jesus taught them never to regard solitude as an experience of isolation, but rather as an experience, a deep spiritual union or communion with God. Not only was he in the company of his Father, whenever he went into prayer, we are told that even Moses and Elijah were having a conversation with him. What does that mean? Well, it means reading and reflecting on the sacred scriptures must have been very much a part of the prayer of Jesus. The Jews referred to the scriptures as the law and the prophets. Since the law was associated with Moses and the prophets with Elijah. To reflect on the law and the prophets is figuratively described by our gospel writers as a conversation with Moses and Elijah. In the later monastic tradition, praying with the scriptures came to be known as Lectio Divina. Fourthly, perhaps for Peter, as it is for many of us, prayer is mainly talking to God. Don't we all go into prayer with the common motive of bringing to God our ardent needs and petitions? Sometimes we really find ourselves talking nonsense in our prayer, much like Peter, who started suggesting to build tents. Like him, sometimes we need to be overshadowed by a cloud of unknowing so that we can just shut up and enter into silence for a while and be able to hear not what we have to say to God, but what God has to say to us. No wonder the message of the voice behind the cloud was, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him. Listen to my Son." In prayer, more important than talking to God is to allow God to talk to us. And this cannot happen if we talk too much, if we do not know how to listen with our hearts and souls. Lastly, prayer is never meant as an escape from reality. We do not go into solitude to escape from community and from the challenges of society. We do not ascend the mountain in order to build a tent and indulge on mental gymnastics over the scriptures. We go into prayer so that we can face the many trials of life more calmly, in order to have what that famous prayer calls the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. After the peak experience at Mount Tabor, Jesus would invite these three disciples to come down, not to remain up there, to come down. And this time, on the way to Calvary in Jerusalem, where the Son of Man was destined to suffer and die. Hopefully, having been given a foretaste and a preview of the glory of the resurrection, they will now be able to face the passion with serenity, with courage, and with a sure hope in their hearts.